how can technology help firms catch avoidable errors earlier without adding unnecessary steps or slowing teams down?
I could probably monologue an answer to this for about a week straight. I'll try and keep it
We
concise.
don't have that long, unfortunately.
Kate really touched on this earlier around how important, the whole process is when looking at requisition rates. Like, obviously, there's so much that can come into it when you come to submitting your AP1, but it's really important, I think, that firms are looking at processes and products and suppliers that can link up onboarding and pre-completion into the post-completion process. If you're onboarding your clients and they're telling you that they are going to be buying as joint tenants or tenants in common, you need to find solutions and technology that can really do a lot of that heavy admin lifting for you and make sure that that data then passes into the way in which you generate your transfers and then get them executed and then submit them over to AP1, to Land Registry via the AP1. And there's so much information, obviously, that then when you come to submit your applications, obviously needs to be checked and reviewed. And we work with so many firms who put so much time and effort and energy into reducing their requisition rates and building these checklists, building things for like new users and new starters to understand like what could potentially go wrong. And one of the things that's really like helpful for us from like a business perspective and the transparency that Land Registry have had around like what requisitions are coming through and the volumes like really helps us build these solutions like into a product. So we're able to do obviously all of like the data validation for avoidable requisitions to sort of see how can we call them out to the user and ideally like reduce them, get them to stop and think before they submit them. But it is really important to also look at like this data flow earlier on in the transaction so that the technology is really like helping and supporting the entire team, not just stopping them from submitting and not just causing them more work and more steps and sort of slowing down the process. Like we want the technology to be doing a lot of the heavy lifting for them so that by the time they come to do post completion, obviously it should have like flowed nicely through the whole process and your post completion team can just happily click submit and not have to kind of go trying to like resolve a lot of issues throughout the process. And on top of that, to touch on, spoke obviously a little bit about the lender integration. This is a classic area where we see like the integration that we've built into LMS and like their lender panels. We know that automatically linking your priority searches and AP1s like to the caseworker zone, we know that that's just going to take admin time away from your team members and ultimately reduce risk for your firm. So we want to make sure that, again, firms are sort of enabled and educated around how technology and software suppliers can kind of provide them with the tools that they need to automate this so that we can really take like all the manual intervention work that they've done with their checklist and just scale it up and help support them at like, high or low volumes, depending on whatever they do.
And does that help you, Kate, with this kind of service?
Yeah, definitely. So, again, we're a massive advocate for technology as well, anything to make our lives easier. So, yeah, for us, it's massively helpful. If technology can assist the teams in getting it right and before they submit the AP1.
Adele, have you got any comments on what Louisa said so far?
Yeah, look, as a firm, we're fairly agnostic in terms of the tech, right? Because we work within client systems. So whatever the client's tech stack is, CMS, any submission tools, etc., we'll use those. So we work with a number of them, and so we have this view across products, I guess, as it were. And they're good, and InfoTrack is something we use extensively because our clients use it. But the main thing, and something that Louise mentioned as well, is just having those checks earlier in the process. What you don't want is to just rely on the tech as a safety net because it doesn't always work, right? And that's not because of any fault of the tech. It's just because of what you put in. And if what you put in isn't great, then at the end of the day, the tech is not going to be as helpful as it could be if only you had checks earlier in the process. So I think it's just building that quality and building those processes earlier and almost as Louise mentioned, it's the pre-completion, right? And it's something we do as well. We do a lot of pre-completion work, checking the files, making sure the documents are there, making sure the signatures are there, if they're not going back to the fee earners, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of admin. It's not just pushing a button to submit an AP1, like we discussed in the first part. A lot of the work is beforehand.
So you've just touched on the safety net, and one of my notes here is for Louise. What is the risk of firms treating technology as a final safety net rather than building quality into the processes earlier?
I think you definitely end up, you're putting bandages over major issues and not sort of fixing the problem sort of upfront or like looking at it holistically. We know that there's just an infinite number of things that can like go wrong, with an application. And even if you look at something that sounds quite simple, like names mismatching, like we know the nuances of that can be very different depending on the transaction. Like, there's no typical like bog standard easy like residential conveyancing transaction. It very quickly can become very complicated, and you've just got so many people involved in it that it's very easy to make mistakes if you don't have anything sort of sense checking it throughout the process. And one of the things that we find, because we've been building these like tools and mechanisms into the platform for like close to a decade now, and especially over the last few years where we've been building these like requisition validation rules with the land registry to stop people submitting, or at least call out, if there's likely going to be a requisition come through. There's just so many there's just so much detail that you have to build into, and it's been a fun challenge for us. And we don't want to stop until our clients have like a 0% requisition rate and things, so we do want to keep going at that. And we just understand that you sort of have to constantly be learning and building and reviewing what people are submitting, so that it doesn't matter like the size of the law firm, but we fundamentally understand like what could potentially go wrong in a transaction. And the way you validate, obviously, has a purchaser got a missing middle name, have the seller's details like not match the proprietorship register and things like that. Like there's just so many different names that need matching. We just have to constantly be building like new rules and new validations based on what we learn through the transactions that come through our system. And again, help our firms of any size like submit perfect applications through. Like we want to make sure that we're empowering law firms who, yeah, I think as Adil touched on, like they don't have the size to have like a full dedicated post-completion team. So they might not have the time to kind of stop and like obsessively check over all of these different documents and things like that. And that is where, like AI has really revolutionized what we've been able to build here. And we just want to build things that will really empower people at any size. But again, if you're just focusing on your teams who are submitting the AP1s and not looking at the full process around like actually why are they having these problems in the first place, I don't think as an industry we'll ever like fully solve the problem until we kind of look at it from the very start at onboarding to when that completion of registration comes through, the lenders are all happy and you can completely close the file down there.
Okay, thanks, Louise. This is an interesting question for me, bearing in mind that my conveyancing career was pretty much ended 20 years ago, and I did 30 years up till then. I never had the assistance that you're offering your customers. So for firms with high completion volumes, what kind of reporting or dashboard information is most useful for spotting patterns and improving performance? Like I said, I never had that.
Yeah. When I first started working at InfoTrack, every firm that I'd go out to would have, a whiteboard with like completion dates, requisition dates, and things like that written up there.
I wasn't even that modern.
Chalkboard, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, we just want to make sure that we're kind of like replicating what solution they were trying to sort of build there. And there's a lot of different versions and iterations of reporting that we provide to our clients that's really based on the feedback and the requests that they've asked for us. So fundamentally, like you need to be able to see like requisition rates at a user level, requisition types as well at a user level. You want to see are certain people doing certain things? Is there any connection between that and the services and features that they're using? But then you also need to see your like applications, I think, looking at the risk level as well. And this is where, again, you need to not just link up your AP1s, but your priority searches as well. So if your AP1 is cancelled, but you're still, maintaining priority through a priority search and things like that. These are the things that you need oversight over. If your AP1 is cancelled and you've lost priority, nobody's resubmitted that application, you are at risk for your firm. And obviously that's going to have negative impacts with, lender panels that you're on and things like that. So there's a risk element to it as well. You fundamentally need to be able to see like which applications of yours have requisitions outstanding. You need the tools as well to be able to say if you're responding to a requisition like document, there might be multiple points in there. You might be answering two of them and there might be one that's still outstanding. So you need to be able to tell the system that you work with that don't, take this off of my to-do list because there's still something that I need to action here. And so I think there's a few different ways to kind of answer like reporting and dashboard information, but fundamentally you need to be able to break everything down across your firm and your team to a user level and see what's happening for your team members, where do you need to support with training, but then also, your responsibility to the firm and to the lenders that you work with, you need to be able to assess all of that information from a risk element to it as well.
How I wish InfoTrack was around when I was practicing. I might have got home earlier and not worked so many weekends. Um,